Hey there. Welcome to Mike's Collection, episode 319. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today are my newest Masters of the Universe Origins figures, I guess we'll say. Now, before I get into doing a review of these figures, in which case we're going to flip the camera around and we're going to take a closer look at these figures and we'll do some comparisons to previous figures of these characters. I do kind of want to talk or maybe even rant a little bit about the state of Masters of the Universe Origins figures. When this line was introduced a couple of years ago, I was really into it, even though I had built a very deep collection of Masters of the Universe Classics figures over the course of about a decade prior to this, which I love. To this day, the Masters of the Universe Classics figures are my favorite of all my Masters of the Universe figures, including the originals, including I've got Funko Pops, I've got reaction figures, I've got the 2002 figures. Um, yeah, I really love the Classics line that ran from about 2009 to 2019 approximately. Those figures were really great. And when Origins was launched, I was wondering, am I really going to collect all of these characters all over again? But one of the reasons that I did get into it, or some of the reasons that I got into it, was for one, they were affordable. These figures were about half the price of all the other figures I was collecting. Here in Canada, uh, your average 6-inch action figure was 35 bucks. It's even more than that now. And the Masters of the Universe Origins figures were like 15 to 20. And that was definitely pretty affordable considering the size of the figure and the number of accessories and everything you get. So I definitely felt like I was getting bang for my buck. The other thing was the novelty of being able to buy Masters of the Universe figures at retail. Now, mind you, it started off pretty rough being able to find these figures. They were supposed to be like Walmart exclusives, but Walmart was not carrying them in a lot of areas, including my own. But fortunately, when the line kind of broadened, opened up to other retailers, it became a little easier to find them. And that was great because the Masters of the Universe Classics figures were only available through Mattel's exclusive website. One or two figures went on sale every month, and you had to jump online and buy the figure as soon as it went on sale. And there was no stockpiling figures to save on shipping. It was like one figure, you bought it, and you paid shipping. Now in Canada, the figures were costing me about 30, maybe to 40 bucks a figure, but then the shipping was almost the same. It was like $30 shipping for each individual figure. And so, yeah, that made for a very expensive hobby. With Origins, they were easier to find and they were affordable to collect. I liked that it was a different form factor than the Classics line. It was going back to the smaller, squattier figures of the original 80s line. So it kind of had its own, it had something unique about it. So I was really into this line at first. And I had I have a nearly complete collection of it. If you look on my channel, you'll find a playlist for Masters of the Universe figures, and you'll find all my Origins videos. I reviewed Wave 1, Wave 2, Wave 3, right up to Wave 14 was the last wave I had done. But besides the standard waves, I've also reviewed some of the box sets, some of the play sets, some of the vehicles, some of the deluxe figures. So there's well beyond those 14 videos. There's probably over 20 different Masters of the Universe Origins videos. But now, I don't even know what to call this video because I guess you could say this is Masters of the Universe Origins 17, even though you won't find reviews for Wave 15 and 16 on my channel. And that's because the waves have shrunk. The waves used to be 6 to 4 figures each. Now they have switched over to a different aesthetic, and they're calling them the cartoon collection. So the figures now look like they're based on the 80s Filmation cartoons, and they're only releasing them in waves of 2. So my last video, I called it just the cartoon collection, and I reviewed 4 figures, which I guess would have been Wave 1 and Wave 2 of the cartoon collection, or you could have considered it Wave 15 and 16. I don't know. It's getting a little confusing. Also, these figures are getting harder to find. I don't really like to do a review of just 2 figures. It doesn't really feel like enough to fill a video. So a little while ago, like we're talking several months ago, when I got Teela and Trap Jaw here from the cartoon collection, which I guess you could consider cartoon collection wave 3 or Origins 17, I was kind of waiting to get some more figures to kind of pad out the review. The next figure I got right around the same time was this guy here. This is Mutated Ram Man, and he's to scale, and he fits in. He displays well with the Origins figures, but he's actually from another toy line called what is it, Ninja Turtles of Grayskull or something to that effect. It's a mashup line between the Ninja Turtles and He-Man, and so yeah, they've got their own kind of wave numbering going on. So it's sort of like a subset of Origins. But anyway, I'm not collecting that wave entirely, partly because they're hard to find. I've never seen them in stores. So I've just kind of bought 1 or 2 figures online, including Ram Man. So then I had 3 figures, and I really didn't know when I'd get another Origins figure to kind of put with those 3 to make it at least a 4-figure video. But then they put up Sy-Klone for sale on Mattel Creations website. And this is the most frustrating part, is it seems to me that Mattel has given up on the Origins line proper at retail. The cartoon collection, perhaps it will start showing up at retail, but for any of these characters that are done in the kind of toy aesthetic of the 80s, these are now becoming just online exclusives, just like the Classics line from 2009, and they're getting expensive. To get this guy to pay for a single figure from Mattel Creations, and just like with the Classics figures, the figure goes up for sale and it sells out pretty quickly. So you have to be there online, ready to buy it. You have to pay the shipping on the one figure, and this guy ends up costing me $50 for a figure that I feel is not really worth $50. These guys, they feel more like childlike toys than the Classics figures. The Classics figures, I kind of understood paying a premium because they were collector pieces, and we were told at the time that Masters of the Universe just didn't have the audience to show up at retail, so this was the best it was going to get. So when these guys came out, I understood why they were at retail, because they were kind of geared towards kids, less so for collectors. So the sculpts are a little more simple. They have fewer accessories, all that sort of stuff. But now I'm paying collector prices for these simpler figures, and that kind of sucks. So anyway, I got Sy-Klone. So I've got 4 figures ready to review. But as you can see, it's a mishmash of cartoon collection, Turtles of Grayskull, Mattel Creations website exclusive, and I thought, well, whatever, that's enough to put the video together. And I knew when I did this video, I was going to kind of complain a little bit about the state of Masters of the Universe, because I am getting more and more holes in the collection, which is getting frustrating, because there are more and more store exclusives, and they're becoming really hard to find. So I missed out on a couple of the online exclusives. Most recently, I missed out on, I think it was Stondar or Rock-On, one of the Rock Warriors. So I missed out on him. I've missed out on a couple other ones. Koldar, I don't have. Now, at least he wasn't a character I cared about. Same as he Skeletor, which was another silly figure I didn't buy, but I kind of skipped that one on purpose. But there have been some Walmart exclusives lately, which you can only buy like online. And I'm here in Canada, and they did not show up on Walmart.ca, the Canadian website. They were only available on Walmart.com, and Walmart.com doesn't ship to Canada. So I literally was not able to get these figures, and I don't know if there ever will be a way for me to get these figures. So I missed out on a couple of characters I really wanted. And the more and more characters I miss out on, my collection just starts feeling like it's never going to be complete, and that kind of makes me lose the desire to even continue collecting it, because it's never going to be a complete collection. So it is what it is. And one of the figures I was most frustrated with missing from my Origins collection was Mossman, because he is a character that he's important. He's a classic character. The characters that I missed out on most recently were a couple of kind of obscure characters. I really wanted them because I'm a fan of the property and I know a lot of the obscure characters, but they don't feel absolutely essential. I'm talking about characters like Lord Grasp and stuff. These guys are kind of deep cuts. But Mossman, he's like a mainstream main character, and it felt like a real glaring hole in my collection that I was missing him, and that really kind of started the switch in my mentality to like, do I even want to continue collecting these? I'm already missing Mossman, and now I'm missing all these other ones. Anyway, I've checked in the past on eBay to see if I could find a Mossman for an affordable price, and I never could. But right after I bought Sy-Klone, and I knew he was on his way here, and I knew I was going to be doing this video very soon, I decided to hop on eBay and check, and I actually found one. And with the shipping and everything, this guy cost me $50, which is more than he would have cost me had he actually shown up here at my Walmarts. But considering I'm paying $50 a pop now for all the Mattel Creations exclusives, such as Sy-Klone, and before that it was Camo Con and Grizzlor. I've bought quite a few of the Mattel Creations exclusives now, and I'm just kind of settling in to the fact that they're going to cost me $50 a piece now. So the fact that I was able to get Mossman for $50, all of a sudden that price seemed pretty reasonable. And yeah, so I'm pretty stoked to get him. He fills an important hole in my collection. And because I was able to get him, I think I will continue to chug along and collect these Origins figures for the foreseeable future. If they continue to get harder to collect and I continue to get holes in my collection, maybe I will lose interest entirely. Like I can already tell you with the pre-orders for the cartoon collection, I'm not buying all of them. I passed on Evelyn, I passed on Stratos, and it's not that they're bad figures, it's just that I already have Evelyn and Stratos in my Origins collection, and I just am really not as excited about the line, so I don't feel I need to keep buying new versions of the same characters over and over again. I did buy the cartoon, or I pre-ordered the cartoon collection of Merman, because he's my all-time favorite character, and I will continue to buy cartoon collection characters that I want, even if I do have the Origins figure, such as Buzz Off, or if they do some members of the Horde and stuff, I will buy those too. But anyway, that's enough of my rant. Why don't we flip things around and we'll take a closer look at all these figures. And I'll get this guy out of the box. So let's first take a look at the cartoon collection Trap Jaw. Now, Trap Jaw is a fan favorite. He is my brother Doug's favorite. Me and Doug collected all of our toys together when we were kids. We shared a bedroom and we split all of our collections. So Merman was my favorite villain. Trapjaw was his favorite. So for that reason, they were usually like the last men standing whenever we played with our toys. So that kind of made Trapjaw and Merman kind of best friends, I guess. And so yeah, I'm a big fan of Trapjaw, kind of by proxy, I guess, just because my favorite guy spent so much time with him when we were kids. But he is a cool looking character anyway. I really like the look of Trapjaw. And this is a cool figure. And he's nice and sleek. He's got that animated style. I think they've done a good job of capturing that Filmation look. So, for example, his belt here is nice and smooth, and that's because they've taken away all the detail. Usually, this plate around his chest has little rivets and bolts and stuff, but in the cartoon, they didn't want to draw that stuff all the time, so everything was smoothed out and simplified, and so that's what you're seeing here. And it works pretty well. Now you can see here he's got his mechanical arm. It's articulated. He's got, I think, just the one alternate piece. So he's got one loop on his belt where you can store the hook. You can pop this laser off and replace it with the hook if you want. And just like the Origins figures, these guys can be popped apart, and you can mix and match their pieces. So if you want to put, He-Man's head on this body and Beast-Man's legs, you can do that, which is pretty cool. I don't have much use for it because I just display my figures on a shelf. But if I had had these figures when I was a kid and I was, playing with them, I really would have loved that feature. In fact, every figure comes with a little, blueprints, I guess, that show you what pieces are detachable. So you can see here, you wouldn't want to try and break his lower legs and his upper legs apart at the knee because they don't separate there, but they do separate at the boot cut. You can't separate his arm at the elbow, but you can pull it off at the shoulder and stuff like that. So those are all the swappable parts. So that's pretty handy that it comes with that little guide. Now each of these figures also comes with a little mini comic. Usually figures in the same wave come with the same comic. In this case, it's just Trapjaw and Teela in the wave. So you can see that both characters are featured on the cover of the little mini comic in there. And you get a little storybook in here that drives the action. So that's cool. And there's a little cross promotion with the two figures that I have and the two upcoming cartoon collection figures, which I'm really looking forward to Merman here. Now, besides the gun, the hook, the comic book, he has one other accessory, which is this crystal, I guess. Now, it's been a really long time since I watched the Masters of the Universe cartoons, but they've been giving us these little, episode-specific accessories, which is pretty cool. So you get lots of these little MacGuffins, which were just used to drive the plot forward, because pretty much every episode was Skeletor, trying to capture some magical jewel or something to, defeat He-Man. And so, anyway, I'm sure the crystal didn't have a weird little handle like this in the cartoon, but they've added it here so he can kind of hold it. Although, as you can see, he's not holding it super well. But anyway, there you go. So that's cool, I guess. So I don't know if I have a whole lot more to say about this guy. I really like him. The colors are nice. The sculpt is nice. The one kind of issue I have, and I really don't remember if his jaw was this big in the cartoon. I assume it was, because I don't know why they would have gone kind of off model. But I have a lot of Trap Jaw figures, and none of them have a jaw like this. Like, it's a really big Jay Leno kind of jaw there. Now, it doesn't look so bad if you close it up real tight. Then all of a sudden, well, actually, it's still pretty big. It's a pretty big underbite. But yeah, he does have an articulated jaw, which is cool. But yeah, it's just a really, really big chin, which is a little, I don't know, I find it a little strange looking. And you'll see what I'm talking about here as I bring in some of the other figures. So here is the first Trapjaw figure from Origins. So you can see this guy here, he's got a little bit more detail. He's got the skull and crossbones on his belt. He doesn't really have the rivets there. He's got some detail on his plate here that the other guy doesn't have. But yeah, he's got this detail in his arm that the other guy doesn't. It's much smoother. And yeah, you can see the shape of his jaw here is much smaller, so that's kind of what I'm used to. The colors on this one are similar, but this guy's got a lot more black on him, which this one is based more off of the 80s action figure, where this one's based off of the 80s cartoon. Now, we also got the mini comic Trap Jaw. So the same figure, just painted in the kind of crazy colors that he appeared in the mini comic that came with the 80s action figure. And I guess the reason for that was they maybe had character designs, but they didn't have the color models and stuff yet when they started making the comic books. So the comic books didn't always match up with the final product. So you ended up with some disparities like this. Anyway, it works out good for us in the long term because we get these cool repaints of characters. Now you will notice here the height difference. This is something I mentioned in my last review of the cartoon collection figures. I don't know why they did this. I figure you want these figures to be compatible. They're kind of marketed to be a continuation of the Origins line. So I don't know why they made these guys just ever so much taller. And it's the case with all of them. He-Man, Skeletor, they all are like that much taller than, the Origins figures. And it looks a little off. It's not such a big deal that you couldn't still intermingle these figures on your shelves. And, I'm sure kids wouldn't know the difference if they were playing with them together. But it just seems like a random thing to choose to do because it's not significant. So why even bother doing it, I guess. Also for Trap Jaws in the Origins line, we got the pre-transformation Trap Jaw, which his name is Kronos, I believe. So this was before he had his jaw ripped off and had his arm ripped off. So he's got His kind of au naturel look there, which is pretty cool. And I guess the last thing I'll show you before we move on to Teela is the classics version of Trap Jaw. So this is the version that was released. I'm not sure what year exactly, probably 2010, maybe 11. It was pretty early in the classics line, but yeah, you can see what I mean. But a little bit bigger, a little bit more detailed. Really cool. I like that figure a lot. This one does have all the little rivets on the armor, and they're all painted, which is nice. So they went the extra mile there on this guy. Really cool. Really kind of gory on the inside there. You can really see where his jaw was ripped off. So yeah, really cool figure. Like this guy a lot. And they actually did, at the tail end of the classics line, they kind of did what Mattel's doing now. They did a cartoon collection, a filmation collection, if you will. And the Trap Jaw they made looked really cool. It looked a lot like this guy, except he was bigger. He was to scale with this guy. And unfortunately, I missed out on that one. It seems like it was always tough to kind of buy these figures because some of them sold out right away. And in that case, Trapjaw did sell out very quickly. And I also think they were maybe making them in more limited numbers because it was near the end of the line and everything. So yeah, it was always a bummer that I didn't get the Filmation Trapjaw. So I am glad that I got a second shot at it here, thanks to Mattel. Anyway, let's move on to Teela. So here is Teela, and I kept Trapjaw on hand just so you could see the difference in the size, which I think is a good thing. Now, mind you, Teela is a warrior woman. She could be an Amazon, I guess. She could be tall and muscular, but it does make sense that she would be quite a bit smaller than some of these big beefcake men like Trapjaw and He-Man and Skeletor. So they definitely did make her a little bit more petite, which I think it works. It looks realistic and everything. So yeah, so that's the size difference anyway. Now, as for the figure itself, I think this is really nice. I think Mattel has done a really good job on this figure. She also came with the same mini comic that I already showed you. She also came with a little blueprint to show you which parts you could remove. She's got her sword, she's got her shield, and then the other accessory that she came with is this little, I guess it's a training drone. Now, I don't remember her using this in the cartoon, but like I said, it's been decades since I've seen those things. But I imagine it's kind of like the little training droids that Luke Skywalker uses when he's practicing with his lightsaber. Looks like these things would fly around. It's got like a knife and maybe a gun on one arm, and I'm sure Teela uses it to practice. So this is a cool little thing that they included. It would have been nice if they maybe gave us a little clear display base so you could have this thing hovering around, because once I put her on my shelf in my collection, I don't really know what to do with this guy. I guess it's either going to lay at her feet, or more likely it's just going to get thrown in my spare parts bin, which is kind of too bad because it's neat. It could almost be considered its own little character. So yeah, I wish it did have a display base, or at the very least a little hole in the bottom, so if I did have a display base laying around from another figure, I could put it on there. But I can't. So anyway, that's that. So here's a closer look at her. I think they did a really good job with the face painting, with the eye makeup. Now it looks like she's got a little Marilyn Monroe freckle on her cheek. I don't know if that's just mine, or if it's intentional, or if it's just a paint error. I don't know, but the fact that it's placed in that exact spot, kind of like Marilyn Monroe or Cindy Crawford or something, it kind of makes me think it's intentional. But I don't think the character has ever had that before, so it might very well be a mistake. But fortunately, like if it is a mistake, it's in a good spot. I'm glad it's not in the middle of her forehead or something weird like that. So yeah, that's fine. But like Trapjaw, the design is pretty simple. She doesn't have any designs on her wrist guards. The armor is relatively smooth. There's not a whole lot of embellishments on there. And yeah, it's just a really nice looking figure. Now, if we do some comparisons, this is the first Teela that we got in the Origins line. Now you can see with this face, it definitely looks, I think, a lot simpler on this version. So normally you would expect the cartoon versions to be kind of simpler and less paint apps, but it's the opposite on this one. I think this one here looks more like a toy or like a doll, whereas I think the face makeup on this one makes it look a little bit more like a real person and less, less plasticky, I guess. I don't know. And then we've got this recolored version of her as well. This one came with in a 2-pack with Zor. So there we go. Now, if I zoom out a little bit here, I will bring in the classic version. Again, big fan of the classics line. It's a really nice Teela. Lots of nice detail in there. You can see all the design in her wrist guard and her armor, all that sort of stuff. So they kind of went the extra mile, all the different paint apps on the sword. These figures have like no paint apps on their swords or anything. Again, that's kind of to match the cartoon, but it's also because they're just cheaper toys in general. Now, as with Trap Jaw, I mentioned that I had the classics figure, but then they released a Filmation figure near the end of the line, and I missed out on it, unfortunately. Now, with Teela, I was able to get the Filmation figure. And when I got the Filmation figure, I was pretty disappointed. So this is the Filmation Teela that was actually produced by Super 7 as part of the tail end of the classics line. So you can see she is taller. She's more in scale with the classics, although they did kind of shrink her down, so she's a little bit more petite. But I just think they really dropped the ball on this one. She looked really good in the promotional materials when they were showing us the prototype, but then what arrived in hand was just a little disappointing. It doesn't really look like how Teela appeared in the cartoon. I know her face is a little thin. Even like her butt is kind of oddly shaped. Like it was kind of a strange looking figure. And I think they have done a much better job on this one. It's actually quite surprising considering the cost of this figure compared to the cost of this one. And yeah, this one's just a lot better. So I think Trap Jaw was pretty cool. His chin kind of threw me off a little bit. But this Teela here, I think is pretty much perfect. I really like it. So next up, we've got Mutated Ram Man. Now, before we really get into the figure, I will just quickly mention that even though this figure is from a different toy line, you can see it comes with the same little blueprint to show you where you can separate the parts on this character. And he also comes with a little mini comic, Turtles of Grayskull. And I'm not sure because I didn't buy too many figures. I only have one other figure from this line so far. I imagine, just like with the Origins figures, you get the same comic with every figure in that wave. So for that reason, this mini comic isn't going to star Ram Man necessarily, because he has to share the spotlight with all the other characters in the wave. But I'm sure he shows up in here somewhere. Like there's a little shot of him there. Doesn't look like he gets to do much in here. You will notice there's this mutated He-Man character. Now, that's the one other figure that I have from this line, and I reviewed him in a previous video. Let me just grab him for a second. I thought he was kind of neat. He's also kind of silly. I don't really have much use for a mashup of the Ninja Turtles and Masters of the Universe. Like you see the Ninja Turtles themselves in like Masters of the Universe armor. I don't really want to add the Ninja Turtles to my Masters of the Universe display. It just kind of throws it off, and they look a little weird in my Ninja Turtles display. So yeah, I'm going to avoid most of those figures. I thought the He-Man was fun because he's translucent, he's purple, he's got these green veins, and I kind of felt like he doesn't look anything like a Ninja Turtle. Like if you didn't know this was from a Ninja Turtle mashup line, you would just think it was some variant of an evil He-Man. They've done a translucent green He-Man before, which is the Slime Pit He-Man. They've done a black He-Man, which was like the Anti-Eternia He-Man. So it's not uncommon, I guess, for them to do a He-Man in a different color. So yeah, I thought this guy was cool. I don't really love that he's got this bandana. That seems a little un-Masters of the Universe-y, but it's okay. And so in my mind, I kind of consider this to be a separate character, kind of like an evil clone of He-Man. Now, with this guy, I kind of felt the same way. He doesn't look like he's just Leonardo wearing some weird armor. Sure, it's a ram, like a goat man wearing Ram Man's armor, but in the Masters of the Universe lore, there's all kinds of animal people. Like we have Stratos, the kind of bird monkey man. We have Buzzoff, the bee man, and Beast Man, the ape man. I'm pretty sure you've even seen goat men. There actually is a character called Goat Man, but like guys with horns and stuff in the backgrounds of the cartoons and stuff. So to me, this is not a mutated Ram Man. This could just be another soldier working with the Masters of the Universe, who just happens to be kind of this goat species, and he's got armor similar to Ram Man. So yeah, in my mind, I'll just display him with my Masters of the Universe characters as another character that just happens to live on Eternia with no connection to the Ninja Turtles whatsoever. Now, I also like that there was some connection with this guy because he's also translucent purple with green veins. Now, not all of the toys in the Turtles of Grayskull look like that. It's really just these two guys. Um, but it's different. I was kind of surprised when I got this guy in hand to see that they are really different colors of purple. So I don't really care one way or the other, but I think I prefer this guy's color. It's a little brighter and it looks nice. For accessories, you can see he's got two different axes, so he can hold both of them, or he also has storage for one of the axes on his back. And yeah, he's just a cool looking character. I like he's got his little ear pierced there, the horns curve around, he's got the goatee. Just looks really cool. Now, my gripe about this figure, I guess, would be the legs. He's got these kind of bent, like goat shaped legs, but the joint here is pretty loose, and he's a pretty heavy figure. Like, he's got some weight to him. So those ankles, they cave really easily, and he comes down. I think if you're going to make a character who's got legs like this, you really have to make those joints tight so they can support the weight. I'm sure I can find a way to get him to stand, but I am a little worried that this guy's going to end up coming down on my shelf and taking everybody else with him. So yeah, he's pretty cool. Now, I guess for comparisons, I'll bring out the Origins Ram Man, so you can see the similarities in the armor, although not the exact same. But you could definitely see how this guy could be, one of his underlings. If he's the general and he's one of his soldiers, similar outfits, yeah, works for me. And then the only other figure that I figured I'd bring out for this is the classic version of Ram Man. So that guy, he's bigger, he's more detailed. Awesome figure. And yeah, that's it. That's Ram Man and Mutated Ram Man. Now here is Sy-Klone. And before we get into talking about the figure, I will just show you that he also came with a mini comic. So even though he is a online exclusive, and his package is maybe a little bit bigger, a little fancier because he's kind of considered deluxe, hence the heftier price tag. But they still give you a little mini comic, and because he's kind of a wave of his own, he has got an exclusive comic book that you can only get with this guy, and that's why he's featured prominently on the cover, because this story is really going to be about him. I actually haven't read this yet. I always forget to read these mini comics actually, but I am glad that they include them. So Sy-Klone, if you're not familiar with him, he has wind powers. So you can see here he's like spinning these tornadoes out of his hands. So yeah, pretty cool. Anyway, Sy-Klone's been around since the original toy line in the 80s. I did not have the original Sy-Klone, and I didn't really care because I thought this guy was kind of dorky. He's got all these really bright primary colors. He looks like a Happy Meal toy or something. And I just didn't think he looked particularly cool. I didn't know if he was a robot or what. He just seemed kind of strange, and I just didn't really care about him that much. However, when Masters of the Universe was revived in 2002 with a new toy line and a new cartoon, I actually really like the angle that they went with for Sy-Klone. They kind of lean into this helmet and everything being kind of a samurai look, and they changed his face. They made him look a little bit more Asian. They gave him this kind of Asian samurai heritage and background, and I actually came to really like the character. And the 2002 figure, which I do have, but I didn't bother to haul it out for this video, but I'll put a picture of him in here. He was really cool. I liked that design quite a bit. It was really dynamic. And they added this new red circular piece, which I don't believe was included with the vintage figure. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But that was kind of a new feature they had added, I believe. So, yeah, pretty cool. Now, because he's got kind of a spinning ability, all of the vintage figures had some sort of action feature. And with the classics and the Origins line, they often have not bothered to recreate the action feature. Sometimes they mimic it, like, for example, Mechaneck. He was a character when you turned him at the waist, his neck would spring up because he had a neck extender kind of hidden in his torso, and when you turned it, a little gear would push the neck up. In the later toy lines, they took away the mechanism, but they just gave you an extra neck piece so you could pop his head off and then add the long neck and put his head back on. So, they've tried to recreate those things. But in the case of Sy-Klone, who had a spinning ability, they have actually recreated that. So you just kind of pull his body up so he's got that little bit of separation. And then you spin this wheel here, and then he spins around like Sy-Klone. So that's pretty cool that they kept that feature because it doesn't really hinder the figure. If it was going to obstruct the movement or make his torso so he couldn't spin at the waist or something like that, I would get why they would get rid of it. But in this case, it was something they were able to add without affecting the figure, so I'm glad that they did. Now for accessories, you'll see here, so he's got his big red shield thing on the back. Then he also has this shield on his arm. Now, I don't know why he doesn't have a gun or something. I feel they maybe could have given him that. But one thing that they did give him, which we've never seen before, is these cool tornado effects. So we've got 2 of those. Now, I do wish there was a way that you could just easily attach them to him, but what you have to do is pop his hands off, and then they just go in there in place of his hands. So I'll try and do this without breaking him. So you take that out, and then that just fits inside the hole. And there is articulation on there, so it can move a little bit. But there you go. So that's how you give him those like kind of wind tunnel hands. So that's kind of cool. However, I figure I will probably just display him with the hands when he's on my shelf. So that's kind of a bummer. That's why I wish there was a way to attach these to him, maybe coming out of the palm of his hand or something, because then I would probably keep them. I just don't really want to have them on my shelf without any hands. Because then it just kind of looks like he's always in the middle of an action, when I kind of like to make it look like they're, standing around waiting to go into battle or something. So it's cool, but I probably won't really get much use out of them. Anyway, for comparisons, I will bring out the classic version of Sy-Klone. So you can see the similarities here. They both have that lenticular sticker on their chest, which carries right over from the original, which I didn't really show you here, but yeah. As you turn him, it looks like a kind of a radar array or something on his chest. I don't really know what the point of that is, but he had it in the original figure, and he had it on both of these versions too. This one has the same shield, but this guy has a gun. So again, I don't know why they didn't give the new guy a gun. Now, when this figure first came out, he had a head that looked a lot like this, which is based on the vintage 80s figure. However, I really liked the 2002 kind of samurai redesign, and I'm guessing a lot of other people did, because what Mattel did back in the day is they released an upgrade set with a bunch of new heads you could buy for your existing figures, which were based on that more stylized 2002 design. And that's how I display Sy-Klone in my collection. So this head here, which might look like it doesn't really match the body because it's got a little bit more detail and everything, that's because it is based on the 2002 cartoon and action figure, which was a little bit more detailed. And I like this design better. I still don't think it's as good as the actual 2002 figure. This one still seems to lean into the original design too much. Like this one, I don't really think Even though the helmet's cooler, I don't think he really looks Asian. Anyway, there you go. That's Sy-Klone. I don't think I have a whole lot more to say about this dude. So lastly, we're going to take a look at Mossman. I still have not opened him up yet. You'll see here that it says, smells like pine, which is the gimmick from the original toy. So even though I said all the original toys had some kind of gimmick, like an extending neck or a spinning waist, his gimmick was that he smelled like pine. And they've kept that gimmick on, I think, every version of Mossman that's come out since. And he's got that flocking kind of fur all over him. So we are going to take a look at him in a second. I do just want to kind of point out the box. All the artwork on these boxes is really great. As I said earlier, I got all those other figures that I showed you some time ago, so I've already thrown out the packaging. I did take some pictures of the packaging, and I've added them in here so you can see the packaging. But since I actually still have this packaging in hand, I did just kind of want to showcase it a little bit. Like there you see, I think that's He-Man in the chest of this dinosaur, which is really cool because this is a toy from the vintage toy line that I believe never got produced. And the fact that they're showing it on the package here almost hints that maybe they're planning to produce it. I doubt it now, though, because the line does seem to be kind of dying out. But who knows? They've done a couple big play sets on their Mattel Creations kind of crowdfunding, like the Eternia playset. So maybe we will get this guy some point down the road. And on the back, I love when they tease new characters on the back of the box. So these are two snake men that we have not seen before. Now, we saw them, they were on the Lady Slither artwork as well. Now, I think the Lady Slither figure technically came out after Mossman. I got her first because, as I mentioned earlier, I missed out on this figure and it took me a while to get him. But yeah, I'm hoping we see these figures eventually because they're pretty cool looking. So yeah, some nice artwork on the box. But anyway, let's pop this guy open and take a look at the figure itself. So here is Mossman outside of the packaging. Looking pretty cool and smelling pretty piney. He has his own mini comic in there, which looks pretty cool. I haven't looked at it at all yet. But yeah. I like that the characters get their own comic. It would be nice if every character got their own showcase, but I can understand that would probably get a little expensive. So whatever. But yeah, the figure looks pretty great. So he is flocked. So he's got that green, grassy coating all over him. And yeah, I love it. He feels nice and soft to the touch. And like around the joints, I am a little scared to move him, so I probably won't move him much for this review because I remember when the Classics figure came out, there was some talk about the flocking and how that was difficult because the original figure didn't have any joints on the legs or on the arms. Like there was no knees or elbows on those vintage figures. And then the Classics figures did have that added articulation. And they were worried if you were bending the knees and the elbows a lot, it would start scuffing the flocking off. And once the flocking started to peel around the joint, would that spread and it would start peeling off on the upper arm and all that sort of stuff. So I'm always really careful around my Mossmen. But yeah, this guy looks pretty good. Like you don't really see much of a break in the flocking around the joints. So he's covered up pretty solidly. And I love that it's two-toned green, 2 or 3-toned. That's just like the vintage figure too. Like it's not just one uniform green color. It really does make him look like moss growing on a log or something. It's very effective. I love it. So yeah, Mossman's been around since the original toy line. And the original figure, believe it or not, I did not know this, and maybe it's because I didn't have Mossman as a kid. I had friends that had Mossman, and I had handled him, and it was no surprise that Masters of the Universe figures reused a lot of parts. Primarily, they had the same torso, the same arms, the same legs, but most of the characters had a unique head sculpt. But I did not know that Mossman was just a repaint or a reflock, whatever, of Beastman. So this head was the head that appeared on the vintage Beastman figure. Now, what's interesting is I have the Origins Beastman figure, but they gave him kind of a new head sculpt that's not really based on the vintage toy. So these guys do not look identical this time around, like perhaps they should, because they gave him a much more authentic head to the vintage head, whereas Beastman, they did not. So, yeah, not just a repaint this time. But one thing that's interesting, I will go over all the accessories with Mossman, but one thing they did give you is an alternate head. And this one here is not flocked. Like, he's got fur on him, so you can see it looks like he's got kind of like a beard and hair, but they did not flock it. So I can't imagine too many people are going to want to display this head on the body, just because without that flocking, it really kind of, it breaks up the figure. It doesn't look as consistent. But this head here is a repaint of the kind of prototype Beastman we got. So this here they call Lords of Power Beastman. And this figure was never produced in the vintage toy line, but I guess this is what the original Beastman was supposed to look like based on sketches or prototypes. So it's pretty cool that they gave us this figure in Origins, but it's kind of interesting that they repainted that head for Mossman. I guess that's just their way of, again, linking to the fact that Mossman is just a repaint of Beastman, or they have some sort of connection. He also has, this is kind of an odd little accessory, but he's got a gripping hand, and then he's got a kind of a slapping hand. Now he has an extra hand here, so you can give him two gripping hands, which I imagine most people will probably do, so he can hold both of his weapons. So yeah, I don't really know why they bothered with this one. Although what's interesting, which I just noticed when I show you that close-up, you'll see that there's nothing on this hand, and there's also nothing on this hand. Like, it's just a bare green hand. But this one, it looks like he's wearing a glove. He's got like some claws on it or something. So I'm not sure. That's clearly like reused from another character, maybe Beastman. But I don't know why they wouldn't match the hands up. That's kind of odd. Anyway, so for accessories, he has got this club. So I'll put it in here like so. And he also has this kind of mace, or whatever you call these weapons, kind of ball and chain thing. So that's pretty cool. And really, that's all I would expect. That's all I would really need with my Mossman. He's got an alternate head. He's got a couple of weapons. Because I do have the classics version of Mossman, which I will bring out here. I like this guy a lot too. So you can see he's a little darker as far as the moss goes. But again, he's got that club. They added that he's got a little kind of a bandolier for his knife and a little bag of, I don't know, magic beans or something. But yeah, pretty cool figure. You'll see that the flocking around the joints there, it's not nearly as, well spaced out, I guess, as this guy is, or it's more spaced out, which doesn't look as good. But anyway, now what you'll notice with this head here, I really like this head, but this figure came with two heads as well. It came with one that was a repaint of Beastman. So again, as an homage to the original figure. But that was really done back in the vintage toy line out of a cost-saving measure. It's not like they really wanted to make Mossman a clone of Beastman. I'm sure they would always like these characters to have their own unique look. So I like that they gave him the same Beastman head as an homage, but then they went ahead and gave him this look, which I really like. It's kind of he looks wise, kind of monkey-like, or ape-like. But yeah, it doesn't look nearly as angry. And in the cartoons, like especially I think the 2002 cartoon, he was portrayed as being somebody that was much more zen, kind of at one with nature and stuff. So this head here speaks to me much more. That looks more like how I would imagine Mossman to be. So when I saw that this guy was going to have two heads, I was kind of hoping they were going to do the same thing. Give us a classic Beastman kind of head for those fans that had this toy as a kid and want it to look like that, but then also give us a kind of unique Mossman head so he feels like his own character. They didn't do that. Instead, they gave us this one, so he's got two angry heads. But, whatever. The fact that I have this guy in my collection already as is, even if this guy had a head like that, I would probably choose to keep him like this. Because, as you saw, even the Beastman on my shelf doesn't have a head like this, so he really doesn't feel like a clone of Beastman here. It's a cool figure. So anyway, yeah, besides all of those accessories, he also comes with some armor, which the vintage Beastman did not come with. So I could put this around his neck, and then that would tie around his waist. And then he also has these pieces here, which go on his arms. And you'll notice that is the same armor that Beastman has. So he's got this piece that goes around his neck, and he's got those extra pieces that go on his arms. So again, that's kind of cool. It's another way to kind of connect these two characters, but Beastman or Mossman has not had that armor in the past. But there is a precedent for this yellow Beastman armor, because I guess kids back in the 80s were pretty notorious at losing pieces. So it was not uncommon for toy companies to sell packages of just replacement parts. I know both G.I. Joe and Masters of the Universe sold these packages of just replacement weapons. And they looked like the vintage weapons or the original weapons, but they were usually sculpted in a different color plastic. So instead of a black gun, you would have a green gun. Or instead of red armor, you would have yellow armor. So in one of the vintage 1980s accessory packs, there was replacement yellow Beastman armor for those kids that lost the original red armor, or maybe I guess wanted to put yellow armor on Mossman here. Now, since I have them here, I figure I'll break it out. But I have a bunch of Masters of the Universe reaction figures from Super 7. So these are the little kind of Star Wars Kenner style figures with 5 points of articulation. I actually don't think it's a very effective form factor for Masters of the Universe characters because, they were all about being big, beefy characters, and it doesn't really work in this style. But anyway, they did a bunch of paint variants of their various characters. So here you'll see they did Beastman in his kind of classic red attire, and then they did do a variant of him in the yellow kind of replacement armor. So yeah, even though I don't have the original yellow armor to show you, I thought I could haul these guys out to show you that there was a precedent set for that. But there has been no precedent that I'm aware of for the yellow armor to come with Mossman, so that's something unique. But it's a cool way for them to find a way to get this yellow armor into our hands. Even if people don't want to put it on their Mossman, some people might want to put it on their Beastman. So, yeah. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say about this guy. Okay, so that is my review of my latest Masters of the Universe Origins, Mattel Creations, Turtles of Grayskull figures. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button. It's actually down below, but hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave me comments. All that stuff helps the channel. It gets the, it helps YouTube push my video around. It, it helps the algorithm, all that sort of stuff. I don't exactly know how it works, but trust me, it does help. That's what people tell me. So yeah, hit those buttons. Anyway, I'll be back with another video soon. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, ciao.